Thank you guys for coming out for a presentation. We're going to be talking about best practices for Google+. Now, this is Joanna Smith, and I'm Gus Class, and we're developer programs engineers on Google+. For the past couple of months, we've been traveling around and talking with people who are looking at doing Google+ sign-in integrations. We've learned a lot about what works really well and what does not work so well, but the most important thing that we're going to try to pass through today is what makes an amazing integration differentiated from a basic integration. So, Joanna?
Exactly. So the first thing we want to do is establish what is amazing. And the easiest way I can think to do this is to show you a live example from one of our partners here at I/O. So Jolie Cloud is pretty cool. They take all of your content, be it personal or social, and they aggregate it into a single user interface for you to see. But what makes them amazing as far as partners go is the fact that they do something called dynamic scoping, where they are letting users take control of their sign-in process from the very beginning. It can be really overwhelming for some users if they are presented with a consent dialog with a lot of scopes, because it's basically asking for this permission and this permission and this permission. And if you don't understand why all of those permissions are being requested, you might get a little nervous about granting access to this app and you might decide not to do it. Jolie Cloud decided to make it better. So what they do is you first click on the button, and then they bring up all of the Google services that they are offering. And you're able to indicate which Google services you care about. So for example, if I don't have a YouTube account, if I don't upload content or videos, I'm going to be really concerned about why somebody wants access to my YouTube activity. So I'm going to tell Jolie Cloud that I'm not interested in YouTube and just the other things. And then when I click this red button again, I'm going to be presented with a Google consent dialog that only has the scopes that I have expressed an interest in already. And this is what we're talking about when really going above and beyond as far as your integration is concerned. Cater your experience to the user and let the user have control over what they're doing so that you can customize for them. So we have a lot of really cool tips and tricks today for how to really make your app stand out. But first, let's take our roadmap so that you understand why you're here and why you want to stay in your seat.
So we've broken up our presentation into 3 pieces. The first is going to be about Google+ sign-in. And we're going to talk about how you can use sign-in to take those people who visit your site and turn them into users of your site. Next, we're going to talk about personalization, which is taking those people who are already on your site, getting them integrated into your site, and giving them an experience that makes them want to engage more. And then finally, we're going to talk about how sharing can turn those users who are already engaged on your site into people who will grow your site into something bigger. So Joanna's going to start about sign-in.
So the very first thing you want to do is you want to get your Google+ sign-in button perfect, because this is how you're going to really open a gateway to your users. You need them to sign in. You need to meet them, to know who they are. You need to convince them to click on that button, because if you can get anybody who comes to your app to click sign in, they stop being a visitor and they turn into a user. One of the worst things for a developer is having tons of visitors because you don't know who they are or how to really engage them or keep them on your site. But once you have users, you can customize the content and really surface what's interesting to them. So the very first step in getting somebody to click on your button, it might seem kind of obvious, but it's making your button available. This means having it in a lot of places. It's pretty apparent to most developers to have their button on the landing page. Somebody arrives at the app, they sign in, and then they get to go. It is less apparent to put a sign-in button next to a piece of content, let's say a video or an article or a single meme even. But honestly, this is the entry point for most of your users. They're going to follow a link or some content that has already been shared. That's where they're going to come in. This is also where they're engaged. This is where they're going to have something to say. So having a sign-in button right there waiting for them is a really important tool. One way you can do this is having the sign-in button as part of your toolbar or behind a menu so that it follows your user throughout their entire app experience. Another way is to try our small sign-in button, like the fave icon, so it's there waiting for them when they decide that they have something to say. Because if you can get them to engage in the conversation, you're really going to improve your entire app community, and that's what we're going for when we talk about amazing. So once you've figured out where you want to put your button, you need to make sure you have the right look and feel of it. And part of this comes from the customization process. Gus?
So let's remember that the sign-in button is there because you want to get users to sign into your site. It's pretty evident. But what Google has done is they've provided a lot of things that make it easier for you to get users on your site. We have localized the button to 60 different languages. We give you multiple sizes, and we also offer the button in 2 colors. A lot of people have asked in our integrations, why do you offer the red button and why do you offer the white button when the Google Plus button on the Google Plus site is red? And so the reason that we offer the white button is so that you can have contrast if your site has a red background. Now, so going back to that, we want that button to be familiar for users when they reach your site. And so in this way, we recommend that you maintain the Google Plus branding on the button, and that you also ensure that your button has contrast so that users can easily see it. Now, when you customize the button, as you can see Fancy has done here, you want to make sure that you maintain that contrast, that you also make sure that the button is familiar for users who reach your site, and that it matches really well with what you're doing. So this is sort of one of the best practices that we've seen very few people do, but that when it's done well, it works amazingly. So let's take a look at how you can handle errors. So what you've probably seen this line of code here before. This is a very conventional sign-in callback. Now the 2 conditions that are the most, like the basic conditions that you'll see, are this top one, which is when you get an access token from the sign-in callback. And this is just your success condition. You know that the user has successfully signed in. And then the next is this immediate failed. So this is what happens when the user is not signed in before, and then the sign-in callback gets triggered when the user automatically tries to get signed in. So what Joanna is going to show you now is how you can go a little bit beyond that and do something to differentiate your site from other integrations.
Exactly. So as Gus pointed out, the first 2 are very normal, prolific use cases. But this second error code, this one that says access denied, this is your chance to be amazing. So what this means is it means that somebody came to your app or your site, clicked on sign in, and then hit cancel. And as a developer, I imagine you want to know why they're canceling. What is it about your sign-in experience that is not engaging? And this is actually your moment to ask your users, essentially, right? So a sign-in callback is a beautiful thing because it triggers immediately after somebody takes an action after clicking that red button. It is your moment to respond to a user action. And if that error code is access denied, that means somebody canceled, which means your response could be a prompt. It could remind a user of all of the really cool features that you have available to signed-in users only. Or perhaps you ask for a lot of scopes, and this makes your users uncomfortable. You could explain your scopes here. You could have a prompt that says, hey, we noticed you didn't finish signing in. We'd like to remind you that if you grant us permission to your Google Drive files, we'll be able to do this, this, and this for you. That's really simple, and it's really easy for you to do. And then you can take it a step further by having another sign-in button where you have a conversation with this user so they can see why they want to sign in, and they can click it right there. They don't have to go back. They don't have to start over. They can just continue signing in with your process. And this is perfect for a developer because you want to be able to engage your users. You need them to sign in so that you can learn about who they are and so that you can begin to personalize your app for them. If you can really customize the content for a user, you're going to be able to turn them into a contributor. Everybody knows those users who kind of show up, see if anything's new, and then leave. But if there aren't any notifications maybe waiting for them, if none of their social contacts have done anything within your app, you want to show them some other content. Really engaging? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so you want to show them some content that they're interested in, so that they want to continue to stay on your app. And what you want to do is you want to turn them into a contributor. You want them to start joining the conversation, leaving behind a comment, maybe adding their own content to the entire community. That's what you really want from a user. That's how you're going to be able to drive engagement and increase the minutes spent in your app every day. So the first step of this is greeting the user, making them identify as a piece, as a component of your app experience. And you can do this in that same callback. In the sign-in callback, on the success condition, if you make a people.get API call, you're going to get their name and their profile image. And this is the first step to greeting them. You know that you're accustomed to seeing a profile image in the top toolbar, and the reason is because this is a powerful statement that says, hey, you are a part of my app. Remember that you're signed in. Remember that what you do here, it contributes to your profile and your experience. But you can also take it a step further. Skill Pages is a site where people can go to list their job skills and kind of make contacts so they can find a new position, which means that the most important thing on a Skill Pages user is their profile. So they want to keep working on it, making it perfect. And what they can do here is Gus signs in, and it's, hey Gus, we missed you. Here are some things for you. They greet Gus in a large greeting. They remind him of pieces of his profile, like what he's already connected his profile to, and also where his location is. And then they show him interesting content that they think is already relevant to him. So he already has things to click on, places to go, and he's encouraged to remain in the app for longer than he would have if he just logged in, saw no new messages, and left. And this is what we're talking about with reflecting the user back, really making them feel like they are a component of your app. But people.get is more than a name and an image. Gus, do you want to talk about the rest?
Absolutely. So what Skill Pages did in their integration is they didn't stop at just the profile. They went and they realized that this user has already provided Google with lots of this information that's relevant to our site. And so what they do is they pull in your work history and they pull in your educational history to give you those first couple of steps of creating your profile. Now imagine what an impact this has on this website that needs you to fill out all this information. All of a sudden, you no longer have to say, oh, I remember that I worked at Spam Arrest, or I remember this, I remember this and that from my work history. The users also don't even have to fill that out to start making the connections that are relevant for this. And you would think that this is a whole bunch of work, but if we actually look at an example of how this code works, it's that same callback that you've seen before. So it's that plus people get, and then you get and in this example here, what I've done is I've filtered it down to just the organizations that user is part of. And once you have those organizations, you can enumerate them by whether or not their educational history or whether or not their work history. But it doesn't stop there. If you want to have a really amazing integration, you can go beyond that, because there's information that users are providing you about themselves already. If you want to be really clever, you can notice inside of my stream that I'm sharing all this information and other people are sharing all this information, and that there's a conversation going on. And so if you're a really intelligent, if you're doing a really intelligent integration, if your software has all sorts of powerful features for interpreting this kind of information and building those connections, then what you can do is you can then go deeper into that user's friends streams, and then you can create connections with their users by using that information. Now, here's how it's done. If you look at the code up here, there's again that plus people list, where I'm retrieving the people who that user has made visible to this application. And then what I'm doing is retrieving the activities that are publicly shared by those person's friends. And so in this way, you can bring in additional information and make those great connections between people. Now, just getting this information and personalizing your site is the start. The next thing that really is important is going to be sharing.
That's right. Once you know who a user is interested in, you can start using those connections to really grow your audience. And what you want to do here is you want to turn that user who's become a contributor, that user who's leaving content and is an active member of your community. You want them to be an evangelist, but you don't want to hire them or train them. All you have to do is convince them to share. Because if a user is talking about what they're doing on your app, they're talking about your app. And that's the best way for you to grow. Word of mouth has always been the most powerful way to really reach out to a new audience, because if somebody brings their connections into the app, they're going to remain in the app. That's going to drive engagement because they're already going to have contacts and people to interact with. And that's why social is so powerful. So if you want to really reach these new people, the first step is understanding why Google Plus is different, because we have two different types of sharing available to you as a developer. The first is our most active form of sharing, and that's an interactive post. And you've been hearing about these and how great they are because you get to really target people. You can flash those notifications across all of Google with a message behind it that means something to a user, because users know that these aren't programmatically written. They know that it came from a friend who had control over the verbiage and the people that it shared with. So when they see these posts, they know that they mean something, and they know that that button is interesting, that it's going to go somewhere beyond just an app landing page. But the second form of sharing is through app activities. And these are programmatically written to a profile, which does make them a more passive form of sharing. But the reason app activities are amazing is because you're not writing to Google Plus and then calling it a day. You're writing to Google. And this has strong implications because Google loves data, and we like to surface that data in really interesting and meaningful ways. So some of you probably noticed a few weeks ago at TechCrunch Disrupt, we announced a new feature where we are surfacing app activities in search. And this is what you're going for as a developer. You want to be able to reach the people that your user knows and cares about, and you also want to be able to reach people that they might not already have a connection to. You want to use your aggregate data to really appeal to other people, to show why your app is above the rest. And so you can take a moment as a developer to think about how to best take advantage for your app of these different types of sharing, how to really use them to achieve what you're trying to achieve, to grow the metrics that you care about. And once you've figured out how you want to share, you want to make sure that there's consistency so that your messaging is recognizable and familiar to the people that you're reaching out to. And that starts with schema markup. Gus?
Yep. So we've been talking about schema with Google Plus for a very long time. This is because schema is very useful for search engines. Many of you guys might already be putting in schema microdata onto your sites for search engine optimization. And so when you provide this information, it makes it much easier to parse that data on your site. Now, with sharing, we have a new usage of that microdata. What we do is we look when you pass a URL for that page with that microdata on it, and we use that microdata to populate the share information. So here's kind of a story of two different shares. If you look at the one on the left, this is the interactive post. This is a targeted share, one that's meant to go to a specific person or specific list of people. And you'll notice in this interactive post, what I've done is I've said, oh, please come and vote for my picture, or come and vote for Ade's picture. And inside of this interactive post is, there's a picture, there's a title, and then there's a description. And all of this is populated from the actual page that the target is on. And so when you do it like this, you can also do something very interesting. You can also have app activities. So what happened is when I voted on that picture for Ade's photo, this app activity was written to my profile. And you'll notice that the information is consistent across all of this. So the title, the image, and the action, well, not the action, but the title and the image and the description are all consistent across here. And something else happens when you use URLs. When you click on the actual relevant part there, then you can be directed back to the site. And this is a way that users can re-engage from your content in a way that is familiar with them, and a way that the behavior is what they expect. So when you're writing app activities, when you're performing interactive shares, make sure that you're using schema on your target pages to populate that data. Now, there's one more thing I want to bring up here. You'll notice these app activities here, they're listed with different types. So there's listened, there's reviewed, and there's a number of other ones that we've provided now. Now, this is a great time to start talking about choosing the right app activities and choosing the right calls to action for your shares. Joanna?
So one of the most important things about sharing is making sure that your sharing is meaningful. It's really, if you're going to grow your audience, you want to make sure that the people that you're reaching out to are responsive to your verbiage and to the words that you choose. And this comes with some difficulty, right? Because we have so many options for you. For example, our call to action label has over 100 verbs for you to choose from for that button. And some of them are very similar. Consider buy and purchase. To most people, these are synonyms. And yet we've noticed that some people, respond to purchasing as if they bought for somebody else. You purchase a gift, but you buy for yourself. And that's a small nuance that's true for some demographics. And so this is a moment when, as a developer, you want to find the words that really appeal to your user base, so that when that button appears, the people that are going to want to be involved in your app are going to click on it. And this is also true for app activity types, for that first word you see in an app activity, because most people like to use the add activity, which is sort of a catch-all. It's user added this content to my app, and that's true for so many instances, which makes it very valuable to use. But the more specific you can be for Google, the more that we can do with your data, and the better we'll know how to surface it to the right people at the right time. And so when you're trying to be specific and you're trying to choose, again, it's that nuancing. And a really good example we had with 2 of our launch partners are TuneIn and Shazam. They're both music discovery services. It's a way for you to find music and understand it and learn about it. But TuneIn went with a listen activity because that's truly what its users are doing. They are finding a radio station anywhere in the globe and listening to it. And it can have social because, for example, my sister and I can listen to the same radio station we grew up with our whole lives, even though neither one of us lives in our hometown anymore. And that's a really good bonding moment. But it's still a listening activity. Whereas Shazam decided to go with more of the discovery approach. Because when you are ready to use the Shazam app, it's because you're out and you hear a song and you're trying to remember who the title is or who the artist is, and you really want to be able to learn more about that song or that genre. And so that's why it's a discover activity, because it's not just listening, there's more to it. And the different users that these 2 apps are trying to reach are going to respond to the different words better. And that's why you can really take some time as a developer to think about what metrics you're really interested in or what demographics you're really trying to reach out to or grow to, and find the words that are really going to work for them. And one thing that works so well for this is experimenting. Our Google Plus Platform Insights give you a lot of data, especially regarding interactive posts. So if you want to use different verbs at different times, maybe do some A and B testing, you're going to be able to see how responsive users are to the different words, and especially using different verbs at different points in your app. Different activities that users can do can trigger different interactive shares, and this is what's so valuable about sharing, because it is so targeted and it's so diverse, and that's what you want to work for. But all of this doesn't really mean anything if you can't target the right people, if you can't reach out to the people that you're the most interested in. And that's the next tip we have for you.
So if you look at this code here, you can see that here's a conventional interactive post, and then I've done something different. But I'll get to that in just a second. Now, when you create an interactive post, like there's this experience where it's like this, you can create a good experience for the user. That interactive post renders, and then they have a nice, well-targeted call to action, so that when that post appears in their stream, that users know what they're going to expect when they reach the other side of that post. Now, you can do something better than that. What you can do is you can take recipients and you can pre-fill recipients into that post. And when you do this, something very important happens. Each of those recipients will receive a notification across Google when they're in their Gmail, when they're in their when they're on their Google Plus account, when they're in their calendar. Those users will have that notification there waiting for them, telling them, this person wants you to do something. And that's something that they do goes directly back onto your site. And this allows your site to grow more. You get that sort of viral growth pattern that happens when people share to specific people. And because it's coming from a specific person to another specific person, you receive that social proof that, Gus wants Joanna to share, or Gus wants Joanna to do this. And so let's look at this code right here, and I'm going to show you how you can pre-fill those recipients so that those notifications are sent. The first example that we have here on the left is this long string of numbers. Now, this long string of numbers represents a Google ID. So you can retrieve this Google ID from an API query against Google Plus to list the people. And to get this sort of better experience, what you can do is you can order by best. And the way that order by best works is when that list of people comes back from Google, Google has performed an affinity calculation. They've determined who the people are who are the closest to this current user. And what that is it's a signal to who the best people are to target this post to. And so if you're targeting these posts, use order by best in order to determine the right people to share with. And we've also done something else here where we've put in someone by email. In this case, just a throwaway email that I've given for this conference. And so you can also target users by email, and those users will also receive notifications. Now, this is all great. You can create this well-targeted post, and you can use signals from Google, which Google pulls in from what those users are doing on Google Plus and in Gmail and so forth. But you can do something even greater. You can create this amazing experience for users by performing calculations based upon your own information that you have about your own users. And you can do things like create interactions between your users by bringing them to and from the Google Plus stream with these targeted interactive posts. And this is really what differentiates a sort of a basic integration from one that just really stands out to us. And it's always exciting for users to sort of see that the site is done, that your site is created in such a way that their interactions are made much easier. So we're going to give you one more tip about interactive posts before moving on.
So anyone who was at Jonathan Berry's talk yesterday with the introduction to Google Plus Sign-In probably heard something cool, which is that the interactive post is a sign-in button. But I want to take a moment to delve a little deeper into this. The interactive post is a sign-in button. That's a really cool feature because it means that every single share on your app could potentially result in a signed-in user. And that's what you're really going for if your key metric is to get more signed-in users or to really increase engagement, because you want everybody to, you want to know who they are, you want to understand your users. But there's one drawback to this feature, which is that the interactive post sign-in option does not support the over-the-air install consent dialog. And if your main metric is driving Android app installs, if that's what you're really focused on this month or this year, this is not the feature for you. And so one thing that we recommend is that you kind of hide the share option, or perhaps you use our original normal share button until a user has signed in. And then you can replace that with the interactive post sharing option. And this way you can channel all of your sign-in traffic through the sign-in button, so you can trigger that over-the-air install and really drive your Android app installs. But like I said, this is another one of those moments when you really want to think about what your key metrics are as a developer so that you can create the integration that's really going to be right for your company and for you, as well as for your users. But no matter what you decide, if you end up going with the interactive post, or if you just have sign-in in multiple places, you're going to want to notice that several of these parameters are the same. These are the parameters that determine the permissions that your users are going to grant you. And if these ever fall out of sync between any of your sign-in options, you're going to end up with a broken user experience. You're going to have users who have granted different levels of permissions depending on whatever these parameters were, and that's not amazing. And so one thing that you really want to do is you want to be programmatically filling all of your sign-in things so that when you change something, if you need to add an additional app activity type, or if you want to expand to start using Google Drive, for example, you want to be able to change the scopes everywhere with a single change in one place so that you never fall out of sync with yourself. So that's actually all of the tips that we had for you today in this half hour, but we have lots more, and if you want to ask us questions, we're happy to help. They can be specific or abstract. The other thing that we recommend is we have a lot of really cool talks going on this year at I/O. So if you missed Jonathan Berry's talk yesterday, but you really want to know more about each feature, I recommend watching the video as soon as it goes up. And if you're interested in more mobile tips and tricks, we have an entire session in the Android track dedicated just to Google Plus Sign-In on Android. Or you can always check out Ian Barber's talk on iOS integration, because I meant Silvano's talk on iOS integration, because these are the ways you can really learn about the mobile-specific things. And then, of course, we're going to take your questions right now. We have 2 mics you can line up at. But before we take those, we're just going to sum things up.
So in short, what we really want to impart on you guys is that when you create an amazing integration, it's just a little different from the basics. You know, think about the ways that you can really differentiate and make the most of all of the tools that we're offering with Sign-In. And when you do this in a really good way, you get the most out of these features. You get more users on your site. You end up getting more engaged users because these users are interacting with each other more, and they have more filled out profiles, and they're finding more people, making more connections. And then they're also drawing more people to your site. They're encouraging growth, and they're making your site into a better experience, into something better for everyone. And one thing that we're always trying to do is find more things that people are doing, really creative uses of the APIs for partnerships that we create. So if you guys are out there and you've got a site and you guys are thinking you're doing something fantastic, or there's something fantastic that you want to do, but we just aren't offering the pieces that, that little piece that you need to be able to do it, find us on Google+, or just, or reach out to us on the Google Plus stream or in our communities. and let us know what you're thinking about, because we always try to be very responsive to what developers want, and we also are always eager to work with people who are doing magnificent things. So that's all we have. Amaze us, guys. We're ready for questions. Again, please just come to the aisle and ask them from the mics.
In your last point, you mentioned about being able to change scopes. Can you kind of explain more on that? I mean, do you prefer having those scopes defined? Let's say, so I'm developing the Google Plus sign-in for Android, and generally we basically define the scopes upfront when we instantiate the Plus client. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned about...
No, so what I meant is if your app has largely been targeted toward just toward Plus, and you're later expanding to something else, that's going to be a really massive change. So you're going to change it in the Plus client, but it's going to force, granting permissions for a lot of your users. So it'd be a big change. But if you ever did that, you would want to make sure that it would change everywhere, right?
Okay. But
it's not like a daily change, no.
Right, but you wouldn't suggest let's say you're already signed in, and then while the user is interacting with their app, by the way, I need
to
this
sign
scope.
in again.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want an experience where users have to sign in and then somehow re-grant permissions, which is why we have that ability to have multiple scopes in a single string. It's a space-separated string, so that you can get all of the permissions in one consent dialog.
Okay.
And that's what's a good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so I'll make one more comment there. So what Jelly Cloud is doing is that when the user signs in, there's a button on the bottom. It's actually it's technically speaking, it's a fake sign-in button. Right. When they click it, it draws up a pop-up. And then they have this selector, so you just click on checkboxes, and then the scopes field that is passed into the sign-in button that renders on the bottom is dynamically populated.
Okay,
And it really is a very small snippet of code that you would have to write in order to do that.
It just appends a string depending on what's been checked.
Right. So basically, a selector would, the user would basically select what he or she wants, and then depending on what those selection are, that's the scope.
Yeah, so it's honestly just a dynamically appended string, and then that's what gets passed in the OAuth call.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you.
Going back to people.get and importing people's personal information that already exists as part of the Google profile, how would you suggest dealing with the, I guess you could call it the creepy factor, where people see their information on whatever service they happen to sign into and don't understand where it came from and how it got there, even if they have already provided that information elsewhere. Because I've definitely heard a lot of complaints, even people talking about Google services. Yeah. And they don't understand how that information got where it got, and it bothers them.
So the activities read API, which is the way that you can read people's data, is restricted only to public data, and this is to protect the users and to maintain that expectation that their data is private and safe within the social network that we have.
But more specifically, I think it's what you're getting at. Like if you're using the people.get call and you're trying to pull in their work experience and stuff. It's granted in the people.get, or in the response, only if it's been made available on the stream. So if they've hidden it there, it won't come to you. So there will never be a surprise. But one thing you could do if you are worried about that creepy factor, because I understand what you mean, is you could always, there's two things that I can see working. You could have a fave icon, right? Like, oh, you got this from G+. Or you could try the confirm dialog. Hey, we pulled your profile, we see that you worked here, here, and here. Is this true? And then let them edit it, right? Because if they feel like they've had some sort of control, they'll probably feel more ownership over it as opposed to creepiness.
And a final note, when you're pulling this data, there's a developer policy that once that user explicitly disconnects their account, that the data should be deleted. So in doing this, we do try to build that trust for the users, and we hope that over time that will show through with our services. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. This question is about sharing.
Sorry, say that again?
The question is about sharing.
Oh, sharing, yes.
Okay. So when a user clicks on share button, does the application get information about user, like user ID?
When somebody clicks the share button?
Yes.
So that share button is a Google-owned, Google-created button. So if they aren't signed into your app, is that your use case? Like they aren't signed in, but they're trying to share? So in that instance, when somebody's not signed into you, but they are signed into their browser or into their phone, then we're going to know that because we're Google and we know when somebody's signed into the browser, for example, like signed into Chrome. And so when they go to share, we'll pull that information in. Or if they're not signed in at all, or if we don't know, then it'll pull in a sign up dialog first, and they can sign in, and then they can continue with the share.
So the callback response gives the user ID, something like that, right?
So
For interactive posts.
After clicking on the share button, let's say you're signed in.
oh, so you're trying to say for callback for a share?
Yeah.
So we don't currently have our own callback. And if you were creating one, you would want to have it so that they would signed in first, so that you would already have information about them.
Okay. So I want to encourage users to share with something when, so I want to reward them with points or anything like in a loyalty program. So I want a callback response when they click on share button.
So in those cases, there is no first-party offering that we have that that'll allow you to detect whether or not that user shared. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah.
So okay, I don't really know quite what you're getting at, but one thing I can say is if you want to come to our booth right after this, we'll both be there and we can try to figure out your question a little bit better.
Sure. Oh,
I just don't want to spend too
Yeah.
long on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And now that I did that, does anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, thank
All
you.
right. Well, very big thanks, you guys.